On August 2, 1939, just 1 month before World War II began, President Franklin D. Roosevelt received a letter from one of the greatest scientists in history, Albert Einstein. Einstein warned him that the world was standing on the edge of a scientific breakthrough with terrifying consequences. Just a year earlier, German physicists Otto Hahn and Fritz Strassmann had discovered nuclear fission. In simple terms, they found a way to split the nucleus of a heavy atom, like uranium. When that happens, an enormous amount of energy is released. Under the right conditions, that energy can trigger a chain reaction powerful enough to create a bomb unlike anything humanity had ever seen. The science itself wasn't the real danger. The real danger was who might build that bomb first. Nazi Germany. That single letter became one of the key events that launched the nuclear arms race during World War II. From that moment on, the race wasn't just happening on the battlefield, it was happening inside laboratories. While soldiers fought with rifles, tanks, and aircraft, scientists were racing to build the one weapon that could end the entire war in a single strike: an atomic bomb. Scientists across the Allied nations had already been working on nuclear research for years. Physicists like Ernest Lawrence had made major breakthroughs, but there was one problem. Everyone was working separately. American scientists had their own research. British scientists had theirs. Canadian scientists were working independently as well. Without coordination, progress was slow. Meanwhile, Germany's scientific efforts were becoming increasingly organized. Everything changed after Japan attacked Pearl Harbor in 1941. Once the United States entered the war, President Roosevelt made a decision that would reshape history. Instead of allowing different countries to continue working independently, he brought them together under one massive secret program. It was called the Manhattan Project. Despite its name, very little of the project actually took place in Manhattan. Most of the research happened in isolated locations across the United States, far away from major cities, where nuclear experiments could be conducted safely and in complete secrecy. The most famous of those locations was Los Alamos, New Mexico. The mission was simple: gather more than 100,000 scientists, engineers, technicians, and military personnel from different countries and disciplines, and build the atomic bomb before Germany did. Leading that mission was an American physicist named J. Robert Oppenheimer. At first glance, Oppenheimer didn't seem like the obvious choice. He wasn't known for managing large organizations. He wasn't a military leader. He wasn't even the most famous physicist in America. But those who worked with him described him as something else entirely: a genius. He spent most of his time reading, studying, and learning almost anything he could get his hands on: physics, chemistry, literature, languages, even ancient Indian philosophy. According to some accounts, he learned enough Dutch in just 6 weeks to deliver a university lecture in the language, without the help of a teacher. But brilliance was only one side of his personality. Oppenheimer also had a much darker side. While studying at Cambridge, he reportedly became so frustrated with one of his professors that he attempted to poison him by placing chemicals inside an apple. The incident was quietly resolved, and his academic career continued. It was a shocking chapter in the life of a man who would later be trusted with one of the most important scientific missions in history. Despite his complicated past, there was no denying his talent. And during the biggest war the world had ever seen, that talent placed him in charge of designing the most powerful weapon ever created. The Manhattan Project wasn't just one of the biggest scientific projects in history. It was also one of the biggest secrets ever kept. More than 100,000 people, including scientists, engineers, military personnel, and even their families, had to live and work under strict secrecy. The US government faced an almost impossible challenge. How do you keep a secret when more than 100,000 people know it? And this wasn't just any secret. It was the secret of the atomic bomb. Security became part of everyday life. At Los Alamos, many scientists used code names instead of their real identities. If someone ever tried to leak information, they wouldn't even know the names of the people working beside them. Even children born in Los Alamos had birth certificates that listed only New Mexico, leaving out the name of the town altogether. The goal was simple: keep the project's location completely hidden. These security measures protected the project, but they also slowed it down. Oppenheimer believed the only way to succeed was for scientists to communicate freely. Instead of working in isolated groups, physicists, chemists, engineers, and mathematicians were encouraged to share discoveries and solve problems together. That collaborative approach became one of the biggest reasons the project moved so quickly. Oppenheimer also pushed back against another concern. Some officials wanted to remove scientists simply because they had left-wing political views or because they had been born in Germany. Oppenheimer disagreed. Many of those German-born scientists had fled Nazi Germany years earlier. They weren't working for Hitler, they were working to stop him. After years of research, calculations, and countless failed experiments, the project finally reached its defining moment. July 16, 1945, a remote desert in New Mexico. Just before sunrise, the world's first nuclear weapon was about to be tested. The operation was given a single name, Trinity. Seconds after the countdown ended, a blinding flash lit up the desert. Then came an enormous fireball, followed by a powerful shockwave that echoed across the landscape. The test was a success. For the first time in history, humanity had unlocked the power of the atom. Watching the explosion, Oppenheimer later recalled a line from the Bhagavad Gita, an ancient Hindu scripture he had studied for years. "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." The reactions around him were very different. Some scientists cheered, some cried, others simply stood in silence, unable to process what they had just witnessed. Years of equations and calculations had suddenly become something terrifyingly real. That moment changed everything. Until then, every scientist on the Manhattan Project had been united by one goal: build the bomb before Nazi Germany. But by the time Trinity succeeded, Germany had already surrendered. The original mission was over. Now a new question divided the scientists. Should this weapon ever be used against people? Some believed using the bomb would end the war immediately and ultimately save millions of lives. Others strongly disagreed. Several scientists urged the White House not to drop the bomb on civilian populations. Some even wished they had never joined the project at all. One of them was Polish physicist Joseph Rotblat. He had left the Manhattan Project back in 1944 after becoming convinced that Germany would never finish its own atomic bomb. For the rest of his life, he campaigned against nuclear weapons and was eventually awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1995. Oppenheimer also sensed that history might not remember them as heroes forever. Shortly after the Trinity test, he addressed the scientists working on the project. His message was both honest and unsettling. "Today, you're heroes. But before long, many people will criticize what you've done." Years later, reflecting on that moment, he would say, "The physicists have known sin, and this is a knowledge they cannot lose." The greatest challenge wasn't building the bomb. It was living with what came next. Despite the scientists' concerns, the war wasn't over yet. On August 6, 1945, the United States dropped the world's first atomic bomb on the Japanese city of Hiroshima. The uranium bomb, known as Little Boy, detonated above the city in a blinding flash. In an instant, an estimated 140,000 people would lose their lives by the end of that year as a result of the explosion and its aftermath. Just 3 days later, a second bomb was dropped on Nagasaki. This time, it was a plutonium bomb called Fat Man. It claimed tens of thousands more lives. Shortly afterward, Japan surrendered. World War II had finally come to an end. But a debate began that has never truly been settled. Did the atomic bomb save lives? Or take far more than it ever should have? Supporters argued that invading Japan would have cost millions of lives on both sides. From their perspective, the bomb ended the war before an even greater tragedy could unfold. Others saw it very differently. Many historians believe Japan was already close to surrender and that a demonstration explosion, far from civilians, could have delivered the same message without devastating two cities. The debate continues to this day. Even Oppenheimer tried to distance himself from the decision. He believed the scientists had fulfilled their responsibility by creating the weapon. How governments chose to use it, that, he argued, was a political decision, not a scientific one. He also reminded people that the Manhattan Project wasn't only responsible for the atomic bomb. The research carried out during the project contributed to major advances in nuclear energy, cancer treatment through radiation therapy, and technologies like MRI that continue to save lives today. The same scientific breakthroughs that created humanity's most destructive weapon also helped improve and protect millions of lives. But Oppenheimer's story was far from over. In 1949, the Soviet Union successfully tested its first atomic bomb. America was no longer the world's only nuclear power. The balance had changed. For U.S. leaders, there was only one answer: build something even more powerful, the hydrogen bomb. Unlike the bombs used in Japan, which relied on nuclear fission, the hydrogen bomb used fusion, the same process that powers the sun. its destructive force would be hundreds of times greater than the bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Oppenheimer refused to support the project. He had agreed to help build a weapon to defeat Nazi Germany. He had never intended to create something capable of destroying entire nations. He warned that the hydrogen bomb wasn't simply another weapon, it was a weapon of mass extermination. Despite his objections, development continued without him. In November 1952, the United States successfully tested the world's first hydrogen bomb. The scientist who had once been celebrated as a national hero was now becoming an obstacle. Soon, old accusations about Oppenheimer's political connections resurfaced. His past relationship with Jean Tatlock, a member of the Communist Party, was brought back into public discussion. Ironically, American intelligence agencies already knew about these connections years earlier. They had thoroughly investigated Oppenheimer before placing him in charge of the Manhattan Project. At the time, his loyalty had never been considered a problem. But after opposing the hydrogen bomb, everything changed. In 1954, Oppenheimer's security clearance was revoked. The man trusted with America's greatest military secret was now treated as a potential security risk. Some of the world's greatest scientists, including Albert Einstein, criticized the decision. But it was too late. Oppenheimer had gone from national hero to political outcast. Oppenheimer never betrayed his country, at least, not in the eyes of history. He believed he had done his duty by helping defeat Nazi Germany. What he refused was taking the next step. To him, the hydrogen bomb crossed a moral line. But while Oppenheimer was losing influence, someone else had already changed the course of history. During the Cold War, American and British intelligence launched a secret operation known as the Venona Project. After years of decoding encrypted Soviet communications, investigators uncovered a shocking truth. The Manhattan Project had been infiltrated. Among the spies were physicists Klaus Fuchs and Theodore Hall. These weren't low-level employees. Both had worked on some of the project's most sensitive research, including information connected to the Trinity test. The discovery raised an uncomfortable question. How could such an enormous secret leak despite all the security measures? Some historians believe part of the answer was Oppenheimer himself. His greatest strength had been encouraging scientists to freely exchange ideas. That openness accelerated the project, but it also made it easier for spies to access critical information. Years later, when Klaus Fuchs was asked why he had shared America's greatest military secret with the Soviet Union, his answer surprised many people. He said he never wanted a world where only one country possessed the atomic bomb. If only one nation held that power, it could threaten everyone else. But if multiple countries possessed the same weapon, no one would dare use it. That idea eventually became known as mutually assured destruction, or MAD. As strange as it sounds, the fear of total destruction became one of the strongest reasons nuclear weapons were never used again in another major war. During conflicts like Korea and Vietnam, nuclear weapons remained untouched, not because they had disappeared, but because every side knew the other could strike back. Ironically, the spread of the bomb may have prevented another nuclear attack. But history had one more contradiction to reveal. After World War II, the United States launched Operation Paperclip, secretly bringing more than 1,600 German scientists to America. Their pasts were often overlooked. Their knowledge was simply too valuable. One of them was Wernher von Braun. During the war, von Braun designed the infamous V-2 rockets, weapons used by Nazi Germany against Allied cities. Thousands of forced laborers died building those rockets under horrific conditions. Yet only a few years later, America gave him a second chance. When the Soviet Union shocked the world by launching Sputnik in 1957, the United States responded by creating NASA the following year. And one of the men leading America's race to space was Wernher von Braun. His work on the Saturn V rocket eventually helped send the first humans to the moon in 1969. The same scientist once associated with Nazi Germany became one of the faces of American scientific achievement. History had judged him very differently. So who was the hero, and who was the villain? Oppenheimer helped create the atomic bomb, then spent the rest of his life trying to prevent even deadlier weapons. Klaus Fuchs betrayed the country that trusted him, yet believed his actions would stop future nuclear wars. Von Braun helped build weapons for Nazi Germany, then became one of the architects of humanity's greatest achievement in space exploration. Three scientists, three completely different choices, three completely different legacies, and none of them fit neatly into the categories of hero or villain. The truth is, science doesn't make moral decisions. People do. The same knowledge that can build an atomic bomb can also power entire cities, develop life-saving cancer treatments, or help doctors look inside the human body using MRI technology. Knowledge itself is neutral. How we choose to use it is what shapes history. Perhaps that's why a memorial at Ground Zero in Hiroshima carries a message that still resonates today. Let all the souls here rest in peace, for we shall not repeat the evil. Decades later, during his visit to Hiroshima, President Barack Obama expressed a similar idea. He argued that science alone cannot answer humanity's biggest questions. Without ethics, without compassion, without conscience, even the greatest discoveries can become humanity's greatest disasters. Oppenheimer's story was never just about one man, it was about every generation that gains the power to change the world. Because every scientific breakthrough comes with the same question: just because we can, does that mean we should? If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss what's next. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.